Before high-speed quads and five-star hotels, Whistler living was a little rougher.
When I first got to Whistler, I came out in a Volkswagen. I had a Marshall stack, a Les Paul, and an acoustic guitar in there, and I lived in the parking lot, which is now called Lot 5. And I lived in Lot 4 and Lot 3 and Lot 1.
Before sabering champagne and lounge piano players, Whistler partied to a different beat.
Well, parties back then didn't go for just one night. They were all about starting on Sunday night, because that's the night that the RCMP left town. And it would basically go on all week long until Friday night when the RCMP came back. Then we'd have to behave ourselves. But parties back then were all about, I can't really say on camera what they were all about.
Before cruising groomed runs and tracked out powder by noon, every day was a powder day in Whistler.
One of my fondest memories of when I first moved here was, of course, the great powder and the long powder runs, and not having to go too far out of your way to get them. And then when the runs were finally done, then you had all the trees they were waiting. And back then, just a handful of guys even knew about it.
Despite Whistler's transition from a town dump to a town center, if you talk to the adventurers who braved the wilderness in the 1970s and 80s, they'll tell you really nothing has changed, at least not the important things.
There's a lot of people who say that there is no real sense of community in Whistler, and I completely disagree. I had a 30th birthday last year, and I had everybody from Florence Peterson, who's been here since 1955, Bush Rat, John Hetherington, who moved here and was the first patrol director, to kids who are here for the season from France. So I think Whistler's gained a sense of being a really strong community that is inclusive of others, no matter who they are, where they're from, what age they are. And it's changed over the years for sure, because it's a much larger community, but I think the threads and the roots are still there.
The spirit of Whistler runs as deep as the forests, and you only need to look into the faces of the people who live here to know it.
For those of us who have lived here for long enough, we realized what makes this place special. And obviously the snow and the lifts and all that do, but it's it's the people, and we're all kind of collectively on the same path in life.
History is people, and there's a lot of people that have made some big sacrifices, have contributed a lot, have done some big things. Those are the people that need to be remembered, and that's the history, I think, that needs to be remembered. If we don't remember those people and that history, we're just far less whole. It's the people that make a place.
North America's leading ski resorts sprouted from the imagination of a small group of visionaries in the 1960s who dreamt of transforming the then Summer Lodge Hideaway into an all-season Olympic resort. 3 rejected Olympic bids later, Whistler realized its dream of stepping to a global podium as co-host of the 2010 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. Canada's Powder Frontier crammed childhood, adolescence, and adulthood into less than 40 years, and not without growing pains, says entertainer Ace McKay, who first moved to Whistler in the 1980s.
It's sort of grown up faster in an accelerated way compared to a normal city, for example. It takes hundreds of years to sort of mature, I guess, but Whistler's had to do it kind of quickly and adjust rapidly, and almost like a flu bug. No. Mutate. But yeah, I mean, it seems like it's done a fairly good job of that. There's always challenges, I think, with that because of it growing so fast. It's hard to look that far ahead, because it's coming at you so fast.
And quickly it came, but rising above the clamor of tourist hotels, shopping, and entertainment, up on the mountain, the deafening hush of riders cutting through virgin powder speaks of a different time. A time when long-haired ski bums left the comforts of city living to adventure into the rough and rugged outdoors. This is the story of one of Whistler's original ski bums. Some know him as Ken Malamud, but most address him as the mayor of Whistler.
When we came here, it was really hardcore. It was hardcore people who were almost escapees, because there was very little here. We moved here, there were 500 people and almost no services. There were two shops, a couple of restaurants. we had to go down to Squamish for everything, pretty much. It was like a frontier town, really. But that being said, the upside was the powder never got skied out. You know, for the ski enthusiast, it was the ideal dream.
Not too long ago, ski bums were the political force to be reckoned with. Chasing powder, living cheap, and most importantly, figuring out a way to get a free ski pass was all a part of the Whistler's 1970s and 80s fantasy. For Doug Craig, now more famously known as Guitar Doug of the Hair Farmers, a ski pass was the trail he hiked up to get to mid-station, where he could ski for free. Some called it scamming. He preferred the term morning warm-up.
When I first got here, a typical day would consist of trying to get out of my Volkswagen. Usually the doors would freeze, so I'd have to kick one of the doors open, I'd get out, I'd pull my skis out from underneath the car because there was no room, get my boots on, and I'd walk over to the lift. And at the time, I used to like to do warm-up exercises in the singing pass in order to get a better day of skiing from mid-station on. And then I'd probably change my clothes at mid-station into something a little drier, and then hook up with a few friends, and we would ski Whistler till about 3 o'clock, and then get home, and there was a communal kitchen, and usually it would consist of poultry products and some type of Vegemite concoction, and anything that basically didn't have any mold on it.
Mold and 5 Aussie roommates in a 2-bedroom shack was a small price to pay to live in the mountains of Eden, where naked wasn't just a birthday suit, but a way of life. Cheryl and Vincent Massey never shied away from flashing some skin.
Back then, you got to remember it was the hippie era, and hippie era is all about free love, free spirit, free everything. Try and get everything for free, and part of that was not having any inhibitions about wearing clothes. The nudie thing's still alive and well up at Lost Lake. Go there to the dock at Lost Lake, and the municipality's all for it. They built a bigger dock to accommodate more nudists, and the tourists go by there and they look down at the nudist dock, and it's not a big deal. And every now and then there's a letter to the editor in the paper saying, you know, well, how can we let this happen? And it's from some tourist who doesn't really understand. But a lot of the people from back then are still here, and that's what we like to do. Bathing suits aren't an issue.
Naked was what sold newspapers as ski bums figured out ways to make a living. Sure, they ran respectable businesses, but they did it their way.
We had a paper up here. The first paper in Worcester was called The Question, and it was pretty straightforward, run-of-the-mill paper, and it always had a picture of a car in the ditch was the front cover, and I just called it the car in the ditch paper. But some friends got together and decided we needed a better paper that was more tuned to the locals that were up here and the cast of characters that run this town. And so they named it The Answer, and it was the answer to all questions. Question your favorite answer. And it was run by a lot of people that were living in a squat, a little log cabin in the woods. A lot in those days. This is in the 70s, early 70s. A lot of people lived in the woods here. You could build yourself a cabin in the woods, and no one cared. Anyway, they had this newspaper in this cabin, and the cops raided it one day and found a few seeds and a few stems from some weed, and tried to bust them, and it really didn't go anywhere. So anyway, they built this new village, which is now Whistler, and they had this brand new police station with freshly planted grass out there. So someone went and put a few pot seeds on the grass, and the plants grew about yay high. And they took a picture of it and put it on the cover of the newspaper of this new police station with these dope plants growing out there. And the comment was, how do you like our gardener? And the police were so embarrassed. It was pretty classic stuff.
They weren't doing their weeding.
No, they weren't doing their weeding.
Whistler was all about pushing boundaries.
Whistler attracts kind of those crazies, yeah, or people pushing boundaries in all sorts of ways. It attracts them. Again, I would have to say because of the mountain and the type of sports, like pushing boundaries in sports, mountain biking, skiing, everything, you're constantly sort of testing yourself, and you go skiing with somebody and they push you, or you push somebody else, and so you're pushing boundaries in that way, and that's exhilarating. And then it kind of teaches you little lessons about the rest of your life, like take chances and don't worry so much about what people think and go for it.
I don't like this term ski bum. I never have liked the term ski bum because it's got negative connotations, and you know, and you tell anybody from, I guess, back east or people that live in the city, you know, that you live in Whistler and this is what you do and this is your choice, and you know, automatically people will, you know, will kind of say that they'll kind of brush you aside as to somebody who's, you know, sold out, I guess, and doing who knows what. But you know, but anyway, the Whistler person, that you know, the people that I love about Whistler, what I love about the people of Whistler are, you know, the fact that they're just living life to the fullest, and you know, and they've got the courage really to do that, and that takes a lot of courage. So it's important that those people stay here in Whistler.
And stay they did. Whether still ripping up the mountains or living on in people's memories, these lifestyle crazies are not forgotten.
I miss seeing Rabbit on his fat skis, and I miss seeing Zeppo at Cheetahs, and miss his Halloween parties and his stories about hot tubs and Playboy playmates, and Lumpy. Yeah, there's been a lot of people who have come and gone that were definite characters. That yeah, and like people like Johnny Thrash climbing in Merlin's naked, and like I do definitely treasure all those weird little things that don't happen everywhere.
These guys are big mountain riders that lived everything to the fullest. They were very, very, very smart people, way ahead intelligence-wise, maybe a week away from getting their degrees in, say, chemical engineering. These guys are like prof materials. And this was the basis for a community that was just starting to, you know, really take off. Swayze, Johnny Foon, I mean, all those hardcore riders are still ripping around here. But really smart, really strong people.
Smart enough to see the budding opportunities young Whistler presented as it grew into an internationally recognized resort by the late 1980s. Other things began to grow in Whistler. Powderhound became gallery owner and family man, Guitar Hippie became renowned musician, and Partier became mayor. Mayor Ken Malamud remembers the shift from bum to business as the blueprints for an Olympic resort finally broke ground.
We came, Yushi and I both came around the winter of 1975-76, and you know, we're fairly oblivious to the town plans. I mean, we didn't concern ourselves with local government. We were here to ski. But it turns out at that time the town fathers had conceived a resort and a town center. And you know, we were kind of surprised when, you know, that summer of 1979 they started to undertake the construction of Whistler Village. And so we knew things were changing, but we didn't really know how much. Well, I remember there was a guy that made t-shirts, Al, and he had a famous t-shirt that said, "Welcome to Pistler Fountain." And the rumor was, nobody's gonna come here. This place can never work because it rains too much. And that seemed to be the prevailing wisdom at the time. But you know, he was wrong. The town fathers really went out of their way and were very visionary to create a purpose-built resort. Part of the secret to the success was the mountains were so incredible, and they really capitalized on that. But you know, as the town grew, we grew with it, and we adjusted and adapted. You know, it was until about the mid-'80s when people really started to wake up, those of us who hadn't been paying attention, that yeah, something was going on. Our heads were starting to spin around at the pace, because the pace of construction and development started to pick up.
Construction flew up at the village and creekside sites. Restaurants, retailers, nightclubs, cafes, and tour operators moved in. Whistler also grew from a one-mountain resort to the home of two, expanding the resort's terrain to 8,000 acres of skiing paradise. Blackcomb Mountain was opened for business in 1980, becoming North America's only mile-high mountain. Air Jordan Williams, head coach of the Whistler Mountain Ski Club, remembers the development of Blackcomb Mountain.
I kind of remember the Captain Varney's explanation of the building of Blackcomb, and it was this giant mechanical spider that laid out these lifts as it climbed up the hill, and it was like the mega monster that came and took over this mountain. And but it's incredible what it did. That was a catalyst for so much. I mean, Whistler used to be a quaint little village that was a neat thing to be a part of. Now it's like a miniature city that everyone would love to be a part of.
Both population and business grew. Bob Barnett, founder of the Peak News magazine, was one of many business entrepreneurs jumping on board the Whistler build-up.
When we decided to start Peak was 1994. The village was basically doubling in size of the village north. So there was going to be twice as many restaurants, nightclubs, advertisers. And so it seemed like a good time to start a paper because the size of the town was growing. So yeah, it's just exponential growth. I remember going to council meetings, taking a wad of business cards every meeting because there'd be so many developers there floating proposals at each council meeting and handing out all my business cards to these guys.
The mountains were also thriving. Whistler was the place to be, according to Leslie Anthony, freelance journalist and editor of Skier magazine.
And there were plenty of opportunities because it seemed there was always something going on here, which was in itself another attraction. It was almost like a snowball effect. It always seemed like, all roads lead to Whistler in the snow sports industry, and all the concentric rings that radiated out, all the ripple effects from trends and happenings and everything always seem to originate here. So it's almost like you're in the snow sports industry, you find yourself somehow gravitating here. For me as a journalist, I could chase people all over the world all year if I wanted to, or I could just sit in Whistler and wait for them to show up.
More business meant more people, and more people meant the building of more infrastructure as well as families.
To be a family here in Whistler is really special. I think to have this opportunity to raise our kids in, basically a brand new town. They've had brand new daycare, elementary school, high school, and all the new amenities. In some ways, it's kind of a bit of a false.
It is too, yeah. To try, when our kids do go out in the big world, our son's at college now, living in the city, and he's pretty good about it. But the rest of the world out there is a little more frightening than here. It's a pretty pampered community.
Very.
Well, our son Tyler and our daughter Michaela, they both are still hanging out with the friends they went to daycare with up here, and that to me it just means everything, that they can still retain their friends from when they were kids. And their parents, we know most of their parents as friends. We ski with their parents. We ski together with our kids' friends.
It nurtures really good relationships when we all interact that way, and I think that gives the kids a really good sense of well-being. It makes them know where they belong and that they're loved and that they're supported.
Some families moved to neighboring communities such as Pemberton and Squamish to escape Whistler's high cost of living.
So the growth has been aimed at the high-end market, but bigger, better hotels, fancier restaurants, and all those sorts of things.
What we've lost is a really cheap rent, man. But on the other hand, I really like having electricity. I love having hot water. And I like having a driveway.
It's hard to see all the chain stores coming in. I had my own store called Home on Deranged, oddly enough, and I made a lot of my own things. And it was 200 square feet, and I had local artists stuff in there, and I used to sit and paint and do pots and things like that. People really appreciated it. But then I got squeezed out.
Village rents rose sky high, so many business owners such as Colin Pitt Taylor set up shop outside of the village in Function Junction and the Nesters area.
I think it's just easier not being in the village than being in the village, for me anyways. It'd be nice to be there, but you have to work too hard for the landlord there. I'd rather work for myself a little bit more than the landlord.
I think it's always been tough making ends meet. I think for a long time people move here and they've had to sell whatever they had to get here, and you have to just kind of paycheck to paycheck until you can put a little away, and then your truck breaks down and it goes away, and then you start again. It's just seems to be that way here. Probably the same as your average city, where it's just that much more expensive inside. But no complaints. I think if I had to leave town due to that, I'd probably change careers and work 3 jobs instead.
3 jobs at once is a breeze when talking about the average Whistler worker who juggles 3 to 5 jobs. Actor Michelle Bush considers herself a pro at everything.
Lots of menial jobs that don't pay a lot. like retail, busing, working in the grocery store.
One of the first jobs I had in Whistler besides waitressing was go-go dancing.
Well, most people know me as a basket weaver, and then a lot of people also know me as an actress.
But I have cleaned, I have faux finished, I've painted, I've had my own stores.
And then DJing, that sort of happened because I actually really needed another job at some point, and I thought, I got lots of records. I could learn how to do this.
I like to focus on the health industry. That's another place that I put to have a business in.
And I do graphic design stuff. Did shoot ski movies for like 10 years.
Work as a makeup artist. And presently working at the Whistler Health Clinic in the emergency department.
I hostess, I cook. So you do whatever you can to stay here.
So why do they stay?
Well, I love the fact that I can, even if I have to work, you know, at home on my computer or something, I can go up for a couple hours and you pretty much can get a full day of skiing if you're single and you just go on the singles line, and you can get a bunch of runs in and come home and feel like you got exercise and then still work out of your house.
I'm a writer. Obviously I do a lot of ski writing, so that, you know, makes this perfect. But, you know, even all the other writing I do, in this day and age, you can write anywhere. So why not live in a place that's inspirational?
The mountains not only inspired business and skiing, but the arts as well. Guitar Doug and Grateful Grey came for the mountains, but stayed for the music.
You can look out over the horizon and you see snow-capped peaks and blue skies. And nature is such a powerful element that we draw inspiration as creative people from nature. It's a well that's bottomless. When we interact with that kind of power within a community, the dialogue is between geniuses.
You know, a town that attracts free-spirited people. You know, mountain freaks, river freaks, water freaks, forest freaks. I mean, those people are creative people by nature. It's not an accident that they're here and that there's such a talent pool of people that aren't just talented skiers or snowboarders or mountain bikers, but they're artists and musicians and writers. It's because people that are that drawn to that kind of free-spirited environment tend to be really creative on more than just one level. They'll carve a line down a hill and then draw a beautiful painting on a piece of canvas. You know, you can see the parallels there.
And we get people coming through the door here who are art critics, art writers, and they're seeking out artists here. And there's not a lot of little closet artists like us up here, but that is hopefully going to change if it can become affordable.
Having art flourish in Whistler goes hand in hand with the activities, the lifestyle. It's important. It's just an important part of like breathing.
Well, people are what makes this town diverse too, and I think if you know, people who visit town here can see that it's not just a sports town, that there are people here who are thinking more along the lines of doing their art up here and expressing themselves like that it makes it more diverse.
Arts, sports, and environment are the three official pillars of the 2010 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. The hosting of one Olympic sport is especially poignant for one Olympian.
Personally, I think it's kind of cool that, you know, I started snowboarding before we were allowed to snowboard, and now we're having the Olympics on the same mountains that wouldn't let us snowboard in the early days. And so it's ironic when you think about it that way. So when I started snowboarding in '87, you know, we weren't allowed to snowboard anywhere in Canada. So in '88, Blackcomb finally let snowboarding, you know, snowboarders up the chairlift. So that kind of started the whole thing. You know, me and a couple of friends came up from Vancouver on opening day in '88, and we're literally the first people to ride the chairlift on Blackcomb on snowboards. And so we kind of seen it grow from zero. Like the culture was underground, of course, because it was all backcountry hiking, and a lot of guys were making their own stuff, and there were no such thing as snowboard shops or snowboard magazines or snowboard instructors or anything like that. Half pipes were built with shovels, and you know, we'd go out and build a jump and hike it all day long, and that was what snowboarding was all about.
This town was born for it. From the first time those guys came up walking around here, it was a plan to make Whistler ready for the Olympics. We've got the best athletes, we've got the best coaches in the world. I mean, this is a town full of Ferraris. As soon as you're out of here, you know, you're dealing with a whole different breed of station wagon, man. Like, this place rocks. And we've got an opportunity to do it, to set a standard and for a low impact, so that we can do this sport thing without a great environmental cost. It can be done, and it's being done.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's the key word, is opportunity. I mean, it's an opportunity for a bunch of people that might not necessarily see what this place is like to actually get a glimpse. It's an opportunity to participate in a human endeavor like the Olympics that's been going on since, you know, the Roman days. It's an opportunity for business. It's an opportunity for all of us to strive to succeed and to do it right.
Really like to see some of our young upstarts that are over in the World Cup right now doing well come back and get a nice big win at home or a podium sweep at home. It's a dream. But you know, at the same time, it's the sort of thing that when the Olympics came, it was the first thing that crossed your mind that, wow, wouldn't that be great if we had one of our club members that's at the national team level, you know, to dominate on that day. Wouldn't that be great?
I think it's great for the athletes that we have the Olympics, and there may even be some Whistler athletes that might participate. So I think that's wonderful. I was just hoping that somehow maybe Whistler could be the first place, Whistler, Vancouver, the first place where the Olympics would not cost more than they did the last place, where we could set an example that way, not the way that they're going to be fantastic, they're going to be the biggest ever and the best ever, but maybe the smallest ever, the least expensive ever.
I do hope that Whistler retains what makes it special. I hope the people of Whistler, you know, stay focused on what really makes Whistler special, and you know, I think it's important that we just stay grounded throughout, leading up to the games, during and after the games. And
I'm excited about the Olympics coming, just because I don't think it happens that often in someone's lifetime that you actually live in the city where the Olympics happen to take place in your lifetime. You know, just the way it is every 4 years and all that. So I think it's kind of luck. You feel sort of lucky in that way that, oh, I live in a town where they're going to have Olympics, cool.
More people are going to know about Whistler, more people are going to be here, but it's a 2-week period. Is that, you know, there are all kinds of connections to people around the world that you can make through this, that can lead to business, to arts, to cultural exchanges that are ongoing, I think. That could be, but I don't think it's all just going to fall into our laps because we're hosting the Olympics.
We are ready for the Olympics. My father was part of the first committee to try and get the Olympics here in '68, and when that failed, they got the Canadian bid to get the Olympics here and try and get the Olympics here in '76, and that failed again. But
we
just weren't ready for it, and I think we're ready for it now. And I mean, it was always a Vancouver-Whistler bid, but we are ready for it now. We've held every kind of World Cup you can imagine here: skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking, huge golf tournaments and everything. But no, we're more than ready to hold the Olympics here.
It will consume us as a community. It's going to have a significant, you know, real-time impact on our lives for greater than those 17 days. But in the long term, there will be amenities left, obviously. There will be legacies left from the games, which should enrich the community experience. And the fact that the additional marketing exposure and the success of the games and the pride, the confidence the resort will have will carry us forward, I think, for a healthier financial future as well. Financial and social and environmental. I mean, it should really have that full package sustainability impact for the long term.
I guess what the 2010 Olympics means to me is a vacation in a sunny retreat somewhere very, very far away.
Hosting the Paralympic Games is a dream come true for the Whistler Adaptive Sports Program. The nonprofit organization ensures summer and winter sports are accessible by all, regardless of disability. Program Director Chelsea Walker envisions Whistler as the most accessible resort in the world.
Whistler hosting mainly the Paralympic Games for me is the most important thing. I have a vision of Whistler that is completely inclusive, no matter who you are and where you've come from and when you've arrived or how long you've lived here. And that translates right through to individuals with a disability. I think there should be no barriers within our community, and the Paralympic Games are acting as a catalyst for a lot of change within our community. And as a result, once we go out to the outside of April 2010, I'm hoping that everybody will sort of sit up and take notice of the fact that everybody's an athlete who's coming to these games, and we should really value that. Typically, the Paralympics have not had as much attention as the Olympic Games, and I'm really, proud of the fact that there has been a big shift in saying that there's a celebration of sport that's coming. There's 2 games, but it's one celebration, and the organizing committee has done a great job at ensuring that the Paralympic Games are getting as much acknowledgement and as much media coverage right now as the Olympics, and to have both flags flying in our village side by side, and for that to be the first time it's ever happened is huge.
Whistler may be all grown up now, but can the resort still manage to be young at heart?
Whistler has kind of matured in a few different ways in my perception. It's like me, I'd like to grow up someday, but I don't want to be a grown-up, I'd like to see it evolve, but I don't want to ever see it hit the top where it has to be evolved and at a point of blowout or no more kind of thing. I think that would be an extreme shame to see the dream be curbed, so to speak.
We had to learn and adapt and grow with the resort as the resort grew. And I think it's fortunate that the consciousness of the community did rise up to have some kind of mitigating impact on it. Because if that hadn't happened, I'm not sure we still would be here.
It used to be seen more in the vein of a Chamonix in North America, where there's great feats of daring do going on all the time, and the potential for death is just around the corner, and it's got the macabre draw to it. People want to be there, they want to be part of the scene, it's big, it's badass, I was there, yeah sure I was just on the bunny slopes, but it doesn't matter. You get the same effect, and I think that what's happened in the last few years is that it's shifted a bit, that perception has been doused somewhat, and on purpose.
Even if Whistler is doused as a family resort, a playground for the rich, and a resort that has something for everyone, Whistler's wild child spirit still rides on because of the people who chose to stay.
Before the peak chair was installed, you took up the T-bars. There's a big sign line, and you'd be waiting in line, sometimes forever it seemed, till this patroller would finally flip the board up and now you could go. So either people traversed over Shale Slope and went into Lower Whistler Bowl, or you could hike up Little Whistler. And it looked like the Klondike Gold Rush going up Little Whistler. It was hilarious. But then people just dispersed, and you pretty much had Whistler Bowl and whatever else you wanted all to yourself. And it was just such a special experience that when it was decided we are going to get a peak chair, I actually voiced that I am leaving. This is it. And I've voiced it many times since, then the quad came in. It was a triple chair at first, then came the quad. Then they summer-groomed Lower Francis. Then they summer-groomed Peak to Creek. And every time I said, okay, if they're doing this, I'm out of here. And I'm still here, and I think I'm here to stay.
Whistler is home.
Whistler is definitely my stage.
I'd say Whistler is everything.
Whistler is getting up at 7 in the morning and going to the snow cone, heading straight up the hill, shredding so you can't ski anymore, and then skiing some more.
Whistler is the new name for Alta Lake.
Whistler is where I've made my career.
Whistler is my favorite place to live so far.
The culture, the environment, the arts, it's everything wrapped up in one.
Whistler is a West Coast mountain paradise that is a privilege to be able to live here.
Whistler is waist-deep powder and big mountain bike epics with friends.
Whistler is our home.
Whistler is where I came to make my dreams come true.
Whistler is going to become the most inclusive mountain community in the world.
Whistler is not being able to sleep because you are so excited about the day that you know tomorrow can be replicated, but it's only going to be better because it snowed 11 feet in 11 days.
Whistler is a place that can still bring tears to my eyes.
Whistler's fast. That's it. There's no more to be said.
Cool. What else